It's been over a year since we first came across the Oppo Find 5, the company's flagship that really put the otherwise obscure company at the time on the map. But here I am, Daniel from PhoneArena, with the next generation flagship, the Find 7. It was the first handset announced with a 5.5-inch Quad HD resolution display, so our curiosity about how the handset turned out is explicable. In fact, Oppo has two almost identical handsets up for grabs now. The Find 7a with 1080p screen that we've already reviewed, and the top shelf Find 7 that is the topic of this video. What makes it top shelf, you ask? Well, it is just a 5.5-inch 1080p display for one with the breathtaking Quad HD resolution and sports a faster processor, more memory and a larger battery. That warrants the Find 7's $100 higher price than the Find 7a, but is it all worth it? Let's figure it out. The Find 7 has clear-cut lines and an overall simplistic design. Unsurprisingly, it's made of polycarbonate, though the chrome ornaments seen with the frame and even the camera ring do add to the overall beautiful and sturdy construction of the phone. The rear shell has an intricate mesh texture to it, which is soft touch and resembles carbon fiber. However, the large size and the significant weight make it one of the less comfortable to use phones. To put that into perspective, the Find 7 is significantly larger than the Galaxy S5, the One M8 and even the G3, which has the same screen size. At the front you have medium-sized bezels with a set of capacitive navigation keys and an inconspicuous rainbow-shaped LED notification light at the bottom. Looking at the Find 7 sideways, we have the power button on the left, while the volume rocker took to the right side of the frame. Unfortunately, these are rather flush with the surface and offer minimal travel. The Oppo Find 7's bragging rights come in the form of a 5.5-inch IPS panel with a Quad HD resolution. This ensures an utterly crisp viewing experience, but this pixel density is actually one of the few good points about the panel. The display returned the largest deviation from the reference 6500K white point we've ever recorded on a flagship phone, meaning that the screen on the Find 7 is way too cold. Not only are the whites not white at all, but rather blue, it's also all the other colors that appear cold and lifeless, especially when put next to a normal color-correct panel. The hues themselves are rather off the mark, and that goes especially for the blue range, but for the reds as well. The screen's maximum brightness of 390 nits is rather low and doesn't help outdoors with the sun shining over your shoulder. On top of that, the coding is not up to par, making the screen too reflective, so reading the display outdoor is a challenge. The only bright spots are the screen's viewing angles, which are decent from all sides, and the fact that it can be operated with gloves on. Powering the Find 7 software-wise is Oppo's ColorOS interface on top of Android 4.3 Jelly Bean. We felt like ColorOS strikes a fine balance between offering extra functionality and keeping things simple and accessible. Considering the size of the device, we're definitely happy to see that Oppo is offering double tap to wake functionality to the 7. Essential apps like the dialer contacts, calendar, messages, email and so on all have seen intervention from Oppo, but again, we like the simplistic, down to the point, at the same time modern look and standard functioning. The more interesting feature of the 7 is its access to the very extensive treasure trove of themes available right through a built-in app. You can change the look and style of both your home and lock screens. For example, you can easily transform the Find 7 to look like a stock Android. Despite the Quad HD display, the Oppo Find 7 is busting out synthetic benchmark charts with the fastest Snapdragon 801 version and 3GB of RAM. It's the same processor found in the Galaxy S5 and LG G3, and neither apps nor games can manage the feat of pressuring the silicone inside. In addition, we noticed that the Find 7 powers through everything from the basics like navigating around the UI through heavy gaming titles without a hitch. You will find a generous 32GB of storage on board with the Find, but you do have the option to expand them even more through a microSD card for up to 128GB more. With such a beastly processor ticking underneath the Find 7 exterior, which should be no surprise to hear that the browsing experience on Oppo's new device is frills-free. The phone loads even heavier pages quickly, and navigating even full-sized website is a breeze thanks to the responsive nature of Chrome. As can be expected, the 7 also offers a sizable amount of connectivity options, including 4G LTE and 42 megabits per second HSPA+ modems. There's however no infrared port for remote controlling electronics around the house, as there is with many other seasonal flagships now. In charge of your multimedia needs are proprietary Oppo apps, such as music and video players, both of which are exceedingly simplistic in nature, though the music one does offer several equalizer presets. In all honesty, they remind of a better looking version of the usual stock Android representatives, and many will probably like that. Obviously, watching clips of YouTube or even the occasional TV show is not an exercise in futility thanks to that large and crisp display and the powerful speaker on the rear. In addition, we get very rich video codec support that includes DivX and MKV files and at up to 2K resolutions at that. The loudspeaker is pretty strong as we mentioned and quite clean, but lacking fullness somewhat. As for the gallery, the same kind of deal applies here. It's also relatively basic, but not as bare as the stock. For example, we have features like a built-in collage editor, which quickly stitches several snaps of your choosing together. The 13 megapixel rear camera on the 7 comes with a wider than average aperture and a dual LED flash. You get the usual shooting modes like panorama or HDR, but also extras such as the so-called HD picture, which creates massive 50 megapixel snaps, and lastly a RAW mode, which outputs shots in a DNG format for easy post-processing. The photo colors are a tad oversaturated, but still pleasant looking, and the white balance measurements are largely accurate, save for a slight tendency towards the warm side of the spectrum at times. Fine detail, even when looking at 100% crops, is discernible without being too sharp, so we're definitely liking what we're seeing here on the whole. In low light scenarios, the phone struggles a bit with focusing, resulting in a tad blurry soft photos, which however show acceptable amount of noise. The color representation is mostly correct indoors, with the Find 7 keeping the true hues even when the lights dim down. The dual LED flash is about average, not very strong, but illuminates the scene evenly from about a 5 feet distance. The Find 7's 5 megapixel front-facing cam produces average results in terms of quality, but it does offer a bit more detail than your typical frontal shooter. Like any self-respecting 2014 flagship, in addition to the now baseline 1080p resolution clips, the Find 7 can also shoot 4K video along with 720p slow-mos. There's also an HDR video mode, though that one isn't worth your time. You trade a significant chunk of quality for a bit more dynamic clip. The rest, however, all produce acceptable footage with fluid frame rate and quick exposure adjustments. The phone's continuous autofocus seems to be very slow, and you'd be better off just tapping on the close-up object and then back on the background if you want to refocus during capture. The Oppo Find 7 seems to be a stellar flagship on paper. It's got a huge Quad HD display, overachieving processor, plenty of memory and a high-res camera. It is, however, marred by some mishaps. The body is fairly compact for a 5.5-incher, but still not as ergonomic as the G3, for example, with the same screen size. The display might be with drool-worthy pixel density, but it's dim and very inaccurate in terms of color presentation. These slight disappointments team up with the fact that the phone is not running the latest Android out of the box and costs in the ballpark of more popular handsets with similar specs. For a tad more though, you can grab the LG G3, which is more ergonomic to hold and operate and offers a better display with the same size and pixel density plus an optically stabilized camera. Another competitor in the range is the Galaxy S5, which will give you a more compact chassis, better camera and longer battery life. Last but not least, the Sony Xperia Z2 offers a waterproof chassis and stellar battery life, all for a similar price. This was Daniel from PhoneArena with a video review of the Oppo Find 7. For more information about this and other handsets, you can visit us at phonearena.com. Thanks for watching.